Stocks on the editor's radar. So today we've picked out two sectors. We'll start off with the paint stocks and then we'll move on to some of those PSU banks. Let's begin by talking about paint stocks because Morgan Stanley, Nikunj, has alluded to the fact that there is going to be a rise in threat from competition and there's going to be a threat to their valuations as well down the line.
See, what was the Indian paint sector? The Indian paint sector had 4 large players, one sumo player and 3 other small players. The sumo name was Asian Paints. And then they had more than 65% market share. The other players had less than 5%, 7% market share each. And that really has been the trend for about 10, 12 years. The sector was growing at 12, 13%, 15% in a good year. These businesses were growing without raising a lot of capital. And when you have growth and when you have market dominance, you obviously enjoy a premium PE multiple. That is the story for Asian Paints. Guess what? That dominance of the sumo is now getting challenged by another sumo group called Aditya Birla. If that was not enough, Pidilite, who was in the same business in home construction, has the same network, is now entering into the paint business, which means that there is a large corporate group who's going to be challenging the incumbent, and there is a home improvement company, Pidilite, who understands the supply chain, has great relationships with the dealers and with the painters. Now is going to be coming up with a paint as a category. So this category will see dramatic and disruptive changes, which means the haloed P multiples, what an Asian Paints or a Kansai Nerolac or a Berger has enjoyed, that will challenge. The sector will grow, but not everybody will grow. There could be a price war here, and there could be a challenge to the P multiple. P multiples are always supreme avan when markets are convinced that growth is going to be internal and that brand will never, will never lose its mojo. That is changing. That will change. And a year from now, 50 times no, 31 times no, 51 times no ways.
Okay, so Pidilite, Grassen, they're really going to change the game with the competitive intensity, especially when it comes to valuations. I'm sure everyone was curious as to what happened to those PSU banks yesterday because they were the top sectoral losers in trade. Put your finger on any of those names and they did come under pressure. Now, a lot of these companies like Canara, BOI have indicated high ECL provisions, and this is going to be a bit of a threat as well down the line.
What is ECL? Expected credit loss. Expected credit loss is something which banks, they normally bake in when they're talking about a forward-looking number. Markets from the PSU banks were anticipating and they were assuming that the expected credit loss would be in the range of about 1% to 1.5%. Canara Bank has come and poured cold water on that assumption. They're talking about 5%. Now, Canara Bank is a big bank. They've got a good book and a sizable book. When they're talking about 5%, it just makes you wonder that our brokerage is very conservative in terms of the assumption for the ECL losses for PSU banks. PSU banks have enjoyed such a nice rhythm. Last 2 years, nothing has gone wrong for them. Everything has gone right for them. And this is really the moment of reckoning where the assumptions on the credit side are not getting challenged. I think it will not impact private banks per se, like an ICICI bank or an HDFC bank. We know their disclosures and their forward-looking comments are very strong. But because of the assumptions what brokerages had in the SMA book, SMA half book, that's a technical term here, these banks will have to, the earning assumptions have to be revisited. And that, I think, in a sense, is really set the cat amongst the pigeon, if I may say so. The downside will not be large because they're still very cheap and credit growth is strong. But yes, in the near term, the momentum has got pricked. That's my limited point.
Yeah, and we saw that reaction clearly play out in yesterday's trade. So there you have it, Aisha. Stocks on the editor's radar.